Gears of War Tactics. I am not saying no one wanted it, but I'm pretty sure my face looked probably something like this when they announced it. I mean, what? But when you sit back and think about it, just, lean back old man style like you're contemplating some Sherlock Holmesian puzzle, it all sort of actually makes sense. That continual use of cover and the active reload and the overpowered short-ranged attack chainsaw that makes no sense but actually makes all the sense in the damned world. And of course, the most important part, the few against the many. At some point, it actually feels like Gears of War was already made for this, and I guess the devs felt the same way. Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap, and today, it's gonna be about Gears Tactics. Got 5 main titles of sending other dudes into dirt naps as Marcus and Dom, then you got Judgment, then you got Gears Funko Pop spin-offs, and now somehow someone got the idea of mixing XCOM into their world of jacked up He-Man looking heroes with Husqvarnas where their handguards should be, and thought, hey man, this sounds like an awesome idea. Gears of War Tactics is coming out on PC Game Pass on April 28th, as well as Steam. Let's get to it. If you like the video, hey, you know what? Maybe subscribe, maybe go out there and find somebody that you've liked and you've followed this entire time. Graphics are up first. Now, I admit it actually takes a little while to get accustomed to this viewpoint. It's unique looking down on these tanks of men that are driving themselves around locations from such a high-on view, especially since up-close and personal chainsaw cam and camera roadie runs were so integral to the initial excitement of the series. Who doesn't remember that first moment when a screaming dude made Brock Lesnar look like Danny friggin' DeVito, literally gutting a locust like a fish while explosions were going off around him? That's right there what an entire subreddit could be. It'd just be called Metal Moments in Gaming. Here, you're stepped back and away in a tactical view that's befitting that title. Now, graphically, it looks fine. It's not in your face or artistically as interesting as, say, XCOM, and some of that is the worldview. Some of it's also that Gears always pop and stopped between Warhammer 40,000K art style like a little, and a future where all the dudes have old motocross bike mufflers for gun barrels and decided that they'd rather tear apart the Harleys and wear its parts for armor versus riding them around. But that thick and heavy look really works well here. Additionally, it's got a moody air to it. Heavy torrents of rain will come down in one level, and the next you're in some kind of almost baked earth desert location, allowing for Gears to sort of stretch its color palette a bit more than I would say I initially expected when this title was announced. And it's awesome when you hyper zoom in on one of the Gears executing an enemy. The game looks great. Chainsaw on a foe will have you drop down into this Gears game's normal camera, and it's basically just like the original proper title, with you all up close and personal as you turn some locust body into the bloodiest intersection known to man. And those parts are epic, and the weight and I said the feel of Gears is profoundly noticeable, especially compared to the more nimble moments in the turn-by-turn sections. I can't say I love the camera zoom itself, though. The game is almost purposely set back too far away from the units, and coming off titles like XCOM and others, that inability to really get close can hurt it when it comes to personality, especially also as easy identifiers for what weapons a character may have to utilize a skill, with you requiring to actually look at the HUD versus the character and see it visually. This lack of information that you can see quickly does hurt it a bit, and these are just meat for the grinders. When you're fielding a team of B-listers like this, you want to be able to see who it is that you're going to throw directly into the chainsaw of death, and you actually can't do that. You have to look around a little bit more than you should. On the other hand, you have the animations. These are very good, especially in the middle battle moments where every single event you remember from the shooter returns, kicking enemies away from cover when you jump over them, chainsawing some dude into 2 bloody mini dudes, or sliding what looks like 15 feet into cover when you hit the cover button, exactly like the main game. The desire to replicate a worldview as close as to the main titles has really paid off. This is no easier established than the first couple times you face off against major nemesis from the games and see them replicated perfectly here. Lastly, I did notice some texture pop in on loads, whether you were loading back into the victorious menu or you were going into a level. This was on a normal hard drive as well as NVMe 2. It happened usually right when that level loaded, or sometimes when the heroes returned, as I said before. Now, performance-wise, the game not only performs very well, it has more settings than I think I've seen in a game like this in a long time. It's easy to get lost in every setting here, from shadow resolutions to their distances to levels of detail. It's no serious Sam in its options choice, but it is not bad at all for a game like this. 80 to 90 FPS on a 1080 Ti at 1080p resolution is completely doable. 4K on a 2080 Ti was well above 60 FPS aside from a couple hits here or there during loading and large pans. SSAO, of course, one of the biggest heavy hitters for FPS. I gotta say, I was really surprised at how good the replication of one world to the next works. This is better to me than Halo Wars was. Gears of War Tactics may have a couple blemishes. It certainly does, but it hits in the places that are most important, and that's replicating this other worldview in a new gameplay style. It just nails the feeling of the Gears of War universe. Usually relegated to that I'm your best friend looking over your shoulder viewpoint, turns it into that 3/4 top down, and it works really well. And that brings us to sound, music, and voice.
Target's an emulsion stash the grubs are prepping for their usual bullshit. Blow it with an explosive charge and take out whatever resistance you find.
Let's get this done! Heading out. Frag out! Eat dirt and die! Your history!
And we will do sound first. Control-C, Control-V, apply sound template. That's pretty much it. Listen, this is all cribbed from Gears, and you can tell it's excellent sound samples with a nice range of not overused effects for open areas that echo out characters' voices as they give affirmatives to the orders that you give them from on high. Now, when you dive down deep into the close camera and chainsaw an enemy, it's almost exactly reminiscent of the Gears proper titles as well. It doesn't feel exactly the same because its viewpoint and thus its audio focal point is different, but its similarities ground you in this same universe. And those shared samples do wonders. And that brings us to music. And I'm not sure what to think. First, this sounds like the original movie Predator's musical moments very closely. From the iconic Dutch and his men moving into the forest scene to the overlooking the jungle scene. It's almost eerily reminiscent, and I am all for one for thematically matching something else, but damn, son! I think it works, and the consistent use of percussion and snare drums and bits that you hear in other places makes you feel like you're going to be waking up at any moment and saluting and doing taps for a second. However, it does feel very close for comfort for me and doesn't feel as original as it possibly could be. I'll let everybody else sort of get their idea on that. And that brings us to voice. Oh yeah, this is Gears. Very Gears. I admit Gabe doesn't sound like he choked down a pound of river rock, then swallowed the entire bottle of vodka afterwards, but he does sound pretty gruff. It's a little more subtle here, though. Some side characters, I think, are actually done better here than they were in others. There's a few standouts as well that you'll probably notice just by voice alone for who they are. It works. I dug it. And while everyone isn't necessarily over the top, because there is a levelness here that I like, and it feels a bit more like a team than the other titles. And it has you sort of understanding that this is a group and it's not one major leader all by himself. That worked really well. When it comes to voice, pretty good. And that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. You play as Gabe Diaz, 12 years prior to the first game, who works in the motor pool, most likely just, hanging around, maybe lifting some weights, maybe doing some Instagram, might delete it later. Then the crap hits the fan and he's needed. So no, he is basically Steven Seagal of the Gears world, not the current one who's eating carrots and Justin Timberlaking around, too busy to give a crap about anything. No, this is the old Steven Seagal, too top secret to even flag top secret until they called him. That's pretty much what you get, and he's quickly put into a leadership role of a ragtag team of Gears. Now, I want to make sure people understand something. There was an attempt to make a character different from the others, but this guy literally takes less than 12 minutes to basically become Marcus the prequel, so don't expect any great shakes to the story. It does enlighten you on a couple pretty big bombshells as this story progresses, but it's not exactly new territory when it comes to characterization. And speaking of territory, that is what you're doing. You're going out there, you're taking on main and side missions, taking back land the locusts have taken, finding out secrets, and rescuing more Gears for your ever-growing ranks of an army. In the barracks system, this is the main place itself, you can recruit Gears you've saved in missions or those who have heard word of your little army and have shown up. They have timers for each for how long they will be around before they leave and are removed and then replaced with a different gear. All of these that show up, aside from the main characters, are randomly generated with active and passive skills applied to their level that you can then add to as they level up in battle with you. There's 5 main classes, that's Scout and Vanguard, Sniper, Heavy, and Support, each with 30 skills or so for each one, some active, some passive. And admittedly, they aren't exactly flashy. Flashy is the presentation of killing somebody in Gears. It's not exactly the purview of the troops themselves. You may have the ability to shoot twice at an enemy, rapidly reload, add action points to another character, heal damage done to your group or one teammate, suppress enemies with heavy gunfire, and an assortment of others, but it's not exactly making you a superstar. However, that's sort of the way this game works. It's not here to elevate the individual with specific premier level skills, but it solidly offers you the idea that these are specific specialties in a real military. And I am fine with that, even if it is a bit dry when you first read them. Also, each of the classes has their own weapon, like a sniper rifle or a chain gun, and you can upgrade the gun in 5 spots, scopes and stocks and clips and so on. Many of the higher level ones have their own skills also added to those items. This does allow for a great deal of customization even within the same class. It can also make initial adjustments of weapons and identifying who is using them a bit difficult, as the HUD itself and the inventory system is not really very good. Tactics, in its desire to deliver that same militaristic overview as a premier title, creates this HUD that, at its very basic, is sort of uninspired graphically as well as presentation visually. Now, sure, the gun mods look nice, but moving through them and identifying who has what and why just never is that eye-catching. Also, if 2 units can have the same item, it will just say something like, "Hey man, you want to steal this from Susan who's wearing it right now?" But there isn't any real detailed information about Susan at all on the same screen. So you can have 2 characters, you can outfit one and then go to the next one and be like, "Oh crap, I just took half of this person's stuff and put it on the other person." Lastly, you have armor and its customizations that are mostly like those of the weapons, adding benefits to things like critical hit and sometimes imparting skills. I will say that customization is also like a redneck fire sale. It's just t-shirts all the way down. The various COG armors look pretty good, but because of their design, when you get into the shirts, it's like looking at a Strange People of Walmart website. It's just dirtystainedtshirts.com. Now, once you've identified your crew, you are off airdropping or driving or riding into danger zone, and you begin choosing missions from those available and having a readout of what caveats, benefits, and possible rewards a mission might get you. Gears Tactics eschews the heavier tit-for-tat balance beam feel of a lot of games like this by doing away with both the grid of movement as well as making sure every character starts with 3 action points. These points can be spent on moving, reloading, firing, and so forth, and can be added with other skills. It's the action points themselves and how easily they're modifiable that sets Gears a bit apart. Take, for instance, killing. It's glorious in these kind of games. We all relish it, even if 99% chance to hit seems like 50% chance in a lot of games like XCOM. But the stroke of genius here is that the devs have made it so that when you drop an enemy, if you don't outright kill them, they will bleed out over a series of rounds. They're pregnant with the anticipation of slowly being juiced out like a drying pumpkin, or one of your teammates or you can execute them. Doing so gives everybody on the team other than you an extra action point, because as we all know, nothing elicits and motivates people like seeing someone's head lopped off. This means you can use the same character for both defensive play, which is a staple of these games, the old hide behind a wall and see if it's half or full shield of protection, or you can sprint forward and just absolutely say go for it with almost anybody. It is not Mario vs. Rabbids in its feeling of embracing movement, but it is a good deal stretchier than a lot of titles. Ignore that it can also look friggin' odd since you're portraying a bunch of dudes who look like Dinty Moore stew cans with legs. This is a game where a normally slow walking tank of a character can, with judicious use of strategy and maybe a bit of luck, hopscotch around the field of war, juicing 3 enemies before then laying down and overwatching an area wide enough to basically just be a dude pointing to the horizon and saying, "I got this space covered." And let's talk about removing that grid system. It's both Gears' highlight as well as an occasional sticking point. First, it makes the game feel so much more fluid than a stop box or grid movement system. Think of it a bit more like a miniatures game on a table with a flexible ruler. There's still a distance system that you're somewhat beholden to, but it isn't that mechanical and dreary. You're not in box number 1, so you can't shoot a box number 2 framework that a lot of these games seem to be so in love with. That's also one of the issues. It can be finicky as hell, and sometimes one space instead of 2 can make you sort of question exactly what's going on. You have to trace back why a longer distance seems to take up less moves, and you usually find some box that your gear is now going to leaping Linny Potho off of to make that trip shorter. But it can get confusing. That's why you should actually watch close for those moments, as it can make more sense to actually just take one action movement at a time versus all 3 with that less definitive pathing. And I like the system a lot, don't get me wrong, but another thing it made difficult was a couple encounters. For example, there's one boss fight where you can lob explosives at them and the cursors seem to bounce around sort of helplessly because the animation of the character during my turn was still running when I was trying to target them, and they're pretty big. I clicked right when it was moving a different way, and it missed and no damage was done. It's not often, but it's noticeable enough that that stuff can happen. Tactics is one of the most rewarding experiences that you can have. It can also be insanely hard. One of the bosses you fight is just, it's crazy. This is pretty much normal for this fight. It does reward you, though, for thinking 2 or 3 or 4 steps through. For example, you might move forward 3 spots if you want. Your turn's over. All 3 action points, boom, done. But since you can move between characters at any time, it's almost always smarter to move just 2 action points, or sometimes even 1, depending on the battle scenario. That way you don't run into a trap or some other issue and overextend yourself. So you can move 2, then you jump to another character that executes someone, which gives you another action point. Then another character maybe plays a skill, which gives you another action point. Changing what looked like a relatively normal move into a character who could potentially bound across the map, or, importantly, actually go into Overwatch. And I say important because normal Overwatch here will have you auto-fire on enemies like all other games, but it has some limitations and perks that are a little bit unique. So packing your character with action points, then giving them the Overwatch, making sure, of course, they have a full gun, is like loading a friggin' tunnel with auto turrets. Characters moving into Overwatch have a chance to also be interrupted, stopping their actions. So this is vital. Be aware, though, that enemies have a lot of the basic skills you do, such as knockback and Overwatch, so you have to really watch out. No matter how good you are, you're probably going to die. When you do, you can be brought back one time with less life, like a second wind. If you die again, it's a recruited character. They're dead for the game. They're just done. No take-backsies. This might have you thinking, why not just take your main characters into battle? Especially, that's how experience and levels and skills are gained. The game has a large number of levels, though, some optional, some main, and some have caveats to them based on story elements and cutscenes or otherwise. So you might enter a fast battle that can't have heavies, and that might leave you with a couple characters a little bit under-leveled. Options and modifiers and adjustments abound in the title as well. I will say this, sometimes, though, they didn't make perfect sense. Like, a couple times I went into a battle and it said you can't use grenades, and I'm like, but why? Why? I mean, why? Like, you have them, why? There's no real reason logically or story-wise that I couldn't use this grenade right now, and that will happen a couple times. When you beat the game, you can get veteran mode, which moves the missions around and adjusts modifiers and mission objectives. That's how Gears of War Tactics comes out on top to me, I think. Things don't always make perfect sense, and it's missing the interesting worldview, I would say XCOM, or a little bit of that quirky fiction like human duck elements of Mutant Year Zero. But it's got some insane strategy, and there are few things as rewarding as thinking, man, this guy has 1 action left. He's in a bad part of the level. He's probably screwed. And then somehow figuring out this amazing game of checkers, hopping and skipping them into safety by executing enemies and almost supernaturally understanding how many actions can be used to add another action and seeing that character live to fight another day. Lastly, I have to say I had no bugs and there are no microtransactions of any kind. Any loot you get in the game is received from items. There's no currencies of any kind. It's all from established rewards and side objectives. And that brings us to fun factor. Gears of War is almost hilariously like its main fiction. It's a bit drab. It's very over the top, though, very heavy-handed, but also incredibly fun, and I like the heaviness. The movement system, it's a little bit nitpicky, and placement is sort of wonky at times, but it's also awesome with you kicking enemies out of their cover and shooting them in the head, switching to a sniper rifle, shooting another dude, and then lobbing a grenade into the bottom of a hole where enemies are popping out all over, and just that on your first turn. That feeling of cultivating one of the recruits into an amazing fighting machine, giving them a war name and a huge beard, some Oakleys, and making generic badass number 45 into Brock the Hammer Hammerstein also feels great. And the game's always doling out some unique situation you have to fight out of. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system. However, this is a little bit different. This is a Game Pass title and on Steam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the Game Pass rating first, which is just going to be go get it or not, and then we'll go with the main rating. Of course, if you have Game Pass, get the damn game. I do think this is worth getting. I do think it's a buy, but I think that you have to really understand what it's going for. It doesn't have that grabby narrative that XCOM has. It just doesn't. It doesn't have that magic, and I don't think Gears ever did. But what it does have, it may not sort of offer it in the overall HUD or anything like that, is a very cool bit of strategy. It is hard. Some of those boss battles are ridiculous. I feel like, for example, the last XCOM wasn't as hard as it should have been. This one might be almost skewing a little bit harder than I expected it to be, and I think that's cool. There is no multiplayer at this time, and there doesn't expect to be, but what you get is a good, solid tactics game that, while not exactly as flashy as you may want it to be, still offers the strategy that you desire it to have. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. You can always check out Reddit and Twitter and Facebook. And of course, Spotify and iTunes. That's where ACG, the Twitch channel, is. We do podcast every single Friday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then that goes up on iTunes and Spotify. If you get a chance, I would love for you to check out Patreon. Come in there. We're going to make sure that you have an absolute blast while you're isolating from others. You can isolate from others, but socialize with us. It is a friggin' phenomenal time in there. I would love for you to come by. So if I've saved you any money or maybe warned you about a game that was shitty, come on by. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.